Welcome to Ames, welcome to QuarryWorks, and welcome to the Phillips Experimental Theater. Here at QuarryWorks and down the road at the Frank Superman Memorial Arts Center, we are of the philosophy that arts should be free and available to all. Not everyone can afford the arts, but everyone deserves the arts. So we are fortunately funded and can operate under donations of folks who are able to afford and to be patrons of the arts. So we thank them for their support. Before the show begins, silence all noise-making devices except your clapping hands and laughing mouths. In case of an emergency, the exits are located on either side of the stage there in the front and behind you in either aisle. In case of a water landing in an emergency, your seat cushions may not be used as flotation devices. If you want raffle tickets for our raffle prizes that will be drawn on October 15th, the Ides of October, as it were, you can buy those in intermission or even right after the show. And without further ado, let's welcome Rick Ames.
Thank you, Announcer. Announcer is a very mellifluous guy, but he's very shy, so he doesn't like to come out of there. Welcome. Now, here's my script. Didn't think I was going to memorize all this, did you? Amy knows I've already been memorizing this year, and I can only memorize so much every year. I'm wearing a shirt with butterflies. I've literally got butterflies on my stomach. Nice to have you here for my last show. Now, where are my readers? I can't do this without my glasses. That would be quite a spectacle. There they are. Our founder and producer, Michael Superman, who's back in Hawaii now, asked me earlier this year, are you going to have live animals as part of your show? I suggested that maybe I just open the door and see what kind of creatures wandered in. And here you are. I hope you're ready to make some noise. Those of you who witnessed my cemetery show last year, remains to be seen, imitated some animals for me, but I'm going to need even more croaking, bleating, oinking, snorting, mooing, neighing, whinnying, braying, trumpeting, roaring, growling, tweaking, chirping, honking, cawing, barking, whining, meowing, purring, squeaking, and other sounds from you throughout the piece. So unwrap those lozenges now. I want you to be in your best voices. I imagine, and I know, because I had some with you, that some of you had a chance to strap on the feed bag out by the quarry before the show. If you need a litter box, there are two up the ramp in the small building behind the theater. What comes next is an amalgamation of animated animal anecdotes, most from my own life and a few collected from others. I hope they will generally make your tail wag and your ears perk up, but just a few may leave you whimpering with your head down and your tail between your legs. By the end, though, I expect you'll want to go out, or a walk, to take a ride, and maybe even have a treat. I can already see you're getting excited. I think I've always had an affinity for animals, but about 20 years ago, once I was a vegetarian and fully out of the closet, I began to call myself by a nickname derived from a canonized Catholic, St. Francis the Sissy. It beats Mary the Fairy by a mile. Plus, it's a moniker I gave to myself. So without further ado, let's get started. I could have likely told a story or made a bad pun about every organism we'll be discussing. Yes, I welcome your input during and after the show, but that will make for a very long presentation. You'd think the obvious place to start would be with house pets, right? After all, as you'll see, they comprise the bulk of my experience, but I think we'll save them for the end. Let's begin then with livestock, since their utterings are more well known. We'll start you off easy, and I think you're all about the right age to know this like I do. Sing along if you like. Green acres is the place to be. Farm living is the life for me. Land spreading out so far and wide. Keep Manhattan, just give me that countryside. Don't be intimidated by my co-star Amy sitting here. Yes, she is a very practiced singer, but you can all join in. So, when I was a tot, my folks brought Bro and I to a local farm in or near Springfield, Vermont, and introduced us to a sow suckling her brood. Okay, folks, it begins now. Let me hear the oinking of sows and hogs and the squealing of piglets. Very good. You all know how to bring home the bacon. Anyway, Dad said, "This is Susie. We're half owners of Susie." Having not yet had a family pet, we imagined she was our first and that we'd visit her often. Turns out, within a short while, she came to visit us. Though we only knew it when we opened our freezer for a popsicle and saw instead pixicles in packages marked Susie. Talk about your unforeseen foreseen. Many weeks before my decision to go meat-free, I saw the movie Babe twice. I felt its sway and changed my way. Although, on reflection, there were probably other childhood influences. My mom's family had some livestock in the 1950s, and there's a story about a pig running toward my Aunt Linda, a little girl at the time, going right betwixt her legs, and she ended up riding it backwards across the yard. I would take a time machine back just to see that. If it's not pork, but porcupines you pine for, hold your horses. We'll get both of those in a due time. But next, on to the bovine and the ovine. Both kinds are so fine. Old MacDonald had a farm. Great, and on that farm he had some cows. With a moo here and a moo there. Hold it. That's some great onomatopoeia, but I prefer to hear something more naturalistic. Give it a try with me. Start down low. Wow, that was utterly fantastic. Best I've ever heard. Way to milk it. I have a family. That was a good animal noise too. I have a family history of interaction with these creatures. When I saw this picture of my father's late sister atop a bucking male, I thought, gee, what a brave kid Judy was. That is, until I saw a picture of their brother Michael on the same animal in the same position, and I realized it was a taxidermized corpse. What a bunch of bull. Talk about a bum steer. My main cattle story, for which I have no pictures except those in my head, is of how the house cows ruined my nights, and how I consequently ruined their entire lives. Driving home from a high school rehearsal at about 10 p.m. one night, I was 2/10 of a mile from the comfort of my bed when I noticed on the side of Route 127 my neighbor Ann Howe's minivan. As I turned to look at it as I passed, I wondered what she was doing out there so late. Then I turned back to the road to see 3 cows, 1 bull, and a calf blocking the entire road right in front of me. I slammed on the brakes and closed my eyes. When I opened them, I was past the cows. I had, however, hit one of the females and nudged her out of the way with the cow catcher of my dad's truck, aka the grill. There was a small dent on the hood, and the side view mirror was partly bent, but the roadway hookers were thankfully all right. Unfortunately, they tended to get over or around the fencing every time Ann's husband Dick was away with the National Guard. This incident was the last straw for her, and they shortly thereafter sold them all for slaughter. So indirectly, I was responsible for all their deaths. Just last year, driving home from QuarryWorks at about 10 p.m. one night, I helped a Center Road neighbor steer a lone young black cow, part of this herd, back into its enclosure. Get along, little doggy! Thankfully, it didn't end up like the house cows. Before I put this species out to pasture, I must confess that I still wear leather belts and occasionally leather shoes, especially in period piece plays on stage. I'll take this moment to thank those who died so I might keep my feet covered and hold my pants on. And on his farm he had some sheep with a here and a they are not bad, folks. I don't have extensive experience with the sheer delight of this group. Of course, I thank them for the wool sweaters and socks I've worn throughout my life, and yes, I've eaten a lamb chop. Not that one. However, a couple of years ago, some ruminators escaped their enclosure while I was talking to the farmer about the location of a cemetery. I helped him out by being a good shepherd. 2 or 2 others, right? That was me, but he does respond. And now here comes a whole flock of kids. And on that farm, he had some goats with a here and a there. Wow, you truly are the greatest of all time. Did you know that the acronym GOAT, G-O-A-T, was coined in 1992 by Bonnie Ali, the wife of Akbar Muhammad Ali, the greatest of all time? Remember him? He'd float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. But we'll get to those insects later in the show. I've only seen 1 goat in recent years, again in my cemetery travels. He had his pokers ground down, except for 1, so I didn't get too close. But when we were kids, we loved the story of the 3 good goats rough. Here are some pictures of us at a young age at a petting zoo. As well, Dad took us to visit his uncle, Ralph Bump, who was really my grandfather's cousin. Ralph had a goat at the time. Dad was tugging on the horns, and when he let go, the bothered Billy butted my boy brother instead. Oh, and I guess there was that time when I brought my paternal grandmother to kindergarten show and tell and introduced her as, "This is my nanny." Goes. She was not a very pleasant woman, but she let that pass. I've actually seen more turkeys in the wild variety than I have those in captivity. Though the wild ones have more predators, they are at least not marked for certain death from their birth.
Another?
They don't have much to be thankful for this November. Although that was a couple of years ago, so they're all gone now. Yes, I suppose ducks and geese can be considered livestock, but my experience with them has always been in the wild. So we'll do a flyover of them in a little while. I fed a llama when I was a boy, or I was close enough to spit, but I've never been too close to alpacas, even though there are certainly some on farms nearby. I've seen a few donkeys and mules in my travels, but none to speak of at length. I just sound like an ass. And for years, there was even a single camel close by in Jonesville, Vermont. But I was always humping it between here and there, and never had the time to stop. I hope he didn't feel I deserted him. So the final farmyard familiars I'll field are horses and chickens. I don't have a lot of equine experience, and I haven't spent too much time with hens and roosters, but I have encountered some along the way. Yeah! And on that farm, he had a horse. E-I-E-I-O. With a near and a near. Whoa there! Why so negative with all that native saying? Well, upon reflection of projection, it seems I do have some experience with horses after all. Here I am saddled up with my brother, two behind me, and in the pink next to it, our summer foster brother, Clifford, who we met through the Fresh Air program. And here, Timmy and I are riding some very docile steeds. But they would only go in a circle. Here's some more I met on my cemetery travels.
Hey!
Hay is for horses, right? Here's a lovely one I got to pet on my cemetery travels. I didn't ask permission, but the horse was okay with it. And in this next, if you listen very carefully, Eric's going to crank the volume a little bit. That was another horse over there responding to me. And on that farm, he had some chickens. With a here and a there. Well, I thought you might lay an egg on that one, but nothing ruffles your feathers. In addition to the city chickens I saw here, I was in a short film which involved a docile chicken, Peachweed. Hold for the crow. I did not act with Peachweed, but I tossed her over the camera in a shot and then retrieved her for each subsequent take. It was only while filming that we found out our cinematographer, Nora Jacobson, was afraid of birds, all birds. But she was a real trooper and stayed in place on the ground, holding the camera, as I repeatedly chucked a chicken over her. Peachweed is shown in the end of this clip from the 2005 short film, The Singers, based on the Ivan Turgenev short story, adapted and directed by my friend Susan Bettman of Middlesex. My grandfather died a few years prior, and those were his shoes. It was great to walk a mile in his shoes, but not great to climb a mountain in those shoes. They were pretty much falling apart by the end of it. But our camera person, Nora, she carried the camera up the mountain too. My character was on the way to a singing contest down in Waterbury, or in the village, in the story, at the Alchemist. I got to see some great animals. These black horses I have a story about at the end of this clip. Thank you, Sue, for letting me film with so many great animals. Here comes Peachweed the chicken. Some of you may know filmmaker and dairy farmer George Woodard. We filmed on his property. He made a great film called The Farm Boy, and it's playing around Vermont. If you get a chance to see it, definitely go see it. Great. Here are George Woodard's cows who didn't want anything to do with me. They just ran away from me. Now, those two black horses in that earlier shot, There's a scene in Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade in Venice when there's a boat chase. Indiana Jones is in the first boat, the bad guys are in the second one, and there's these two big boats being pushed together by tugboats, very close together. And Indiana Jones' boat goes right through the one, but they're closer, and the next one, the bad guys, explodes. It gets crushed. Well, that happened to me almost with those black horses. Their backs were about this tall, and there's some footage on the cutting room floor of this film that I saw after the dailies shooting, and I was walking between those two horses, and just after I passed betwixt them, they shuddered up against each other, and their rib cages hit. And I thought, I was not insured in those days, Sue. And I got at the University of Vermont Medical Center in Burlington. How did this happen, sir? I got stuck between two horses. There was also footage where I lay down in the grass among those lambs and the goat kid, and the kid was trying to nibble on my straw hats. Mares, he don't said little lambs, he'd ivy, a kid he'd ivy too, wouldn't you? I only know that because of a chorus, high school chorus melody, medley. That's the word, medley. Okay, now that you got the hang of it, I want you to make any appropriate animal sound anytime you see a new creature, okay? And sing along if you know this. Wild thing, you make my heart sing. Hey, you make everything groovy. Into the woods without delay, but careful not to lose the way. Into the woods who know one day be lurking on the journey. In Lost Nation Theater's 2017 production of Sondheim's fairy tale mashup, one of the roles I played was the Big Bad Wolf, which gave me ample opportunity to belch on stage after eating Granny and Little Red. Thanks for the salad, Sue. And next month, I'll be among the cast of Eric R. Hill's The Wolves of the Whispering Woods. Though that's not just about wolves, but rather about werewolves. And in 1993, I wrote lyrics to Jen McVetie's children's show, Little Red and the Riding Hoods, in which I played the narrator. Our Big Bad Wolf sang to Little Red to a familiar TV theme song tune, Wolf, I'm bad and I'm big, I'll blow down the house of some little pig. Upon which the remainder of the cast yelled out, wrong show! It seems my lupine adventures were only on stage. We'll see a few more instances where I portrayed a non-human animal for the entertainment of them asses. Oops, the masses. Sorry. I'm especially pleased to report that we have a plentiful porcupine population up here at the quarry. Though we're not thrilled that they chew on a lot of the wood, yes, even the outside of this building, they've always held a special place in my heart. Their numbers were diminished when my dad was young, as hunters had eradicated fisher cats, one of the main predators for porcupines. They were consequently present in great numbers, and the wildlife authorities in central New Hampshire offered 2 bits for any that a person would kill. Initially, they only asked killers to bring in the nose, but as some tried to pass off pieces of leather as snouts, they then asked for the whole spiky carcass. A generation later, Dad explained my origin story to me as, one day, in 1970, your mom and I were hiking in the woods. We saw an old lava porcupine exiting a hollow log. We went over to look in the log and found a little baby porcupine. We carefully removed all its quills, and there you were, Gary. I must have asked where babies came from. When I was 9 or 10, a neighbor who was a teacher brought me to the high school for an animal exhibit, and I got to pet a domesticated porcupine, very gently, from the head back. Here are just a couple of porcupines that I've seen here at the quarry. This may be Deborah, who was named years ago by Sawyer Esteville, who's grown up at the quarry and is now almost as tall as I. They actually climb trees too, if you didn't know. We were doing a music concert down at the concert hall down there. We saw 2 walk by during the piano music outside. We didn't see them continue, and after the show, there they were up in the tree. In the next 2 slides and 6 videos, a gentleman I call William Shakespeare. This is just over there near the bathrooms, so if the bathroom door is open when you go in, be careful when you sit down. I don't want you coming back from intermission a sore ass.
Hello. Hi there.
Here's a mouse in the men's dressing room here at QuarryWorks. Cassandra Seabra and probably all of the women are thankful that some years ago now we switched the designation of which dressing room was for which identified gender. I don't have any mole videos to offer, but I have avoided several on Central Road late at night. And my late cat Janice, more about him later, used to leave them on my back porch where I often almost stepped on them barefoot. I teased him that all he could catch and kill was a slow, blind rodent. I had a great video of a vole sidling down the sidewalk in Colchester, but I couldn't locate it. When living at the Hotel Coolidge for 5 months while working in Northern Stage and White River Junction, we snuck down into the basement of the old hotel. On either side of the lit center pathway were hundreds of bats swooping back and forth in the relative darkness. We only had a couple of encounters with individual bats in the hotel's upper hallways. If you want to see bats here at QuarryWorks, join us next August for Dracula. When I lived in New York City in 1989 and 1990, the rats in Central Park and in the subways at South Station and Battery Park were frankly the size of small cats. But in my apartment, I only ever caught two, not much larger than mice, only identifiable as rats by their different type of tails. I caught them in snap kill traps and put them in the freezer in a sugar container with 2 palmetto bugs I stomped, planning to show them all to the landlord. Mom came to visit for a couple of days. When I came home from work one afternoon, she mentioned, "I hope you don't mind that I ate the rest of your sherbet." It was going bad anyway, I think. It was pretty chunky. That was before Ben & Jerry's put a lot of chunks in. That's where they got the idea from me. That was the original flavor. Rats and palmetto. And speaking of rats and moles, here's one of each, with a toad between us in the Wind in the Willows at Northern Stage in December 1997. My dad showed his bravery as a young Davy Crockett in the early 1950s as he led a bear down the street in Franklin, New Hampshire during a parade. Dad has another bear story, he told me, but he's also told me to consider your audience, son, so I'm going to be considered. I had other Ursine influences in my youth and since. The one, though, which means the most to me is the continuation of the family origin story that Dad told when my little brother came along. You and Mommy and I were walking through the woods, and we saw an old mama bear come out of the cave. We went into the cave and found a little bear cub. We brushed off all his hair, and it was your brother, Timmy. Apart from the part about stealing children from wilderness mothers, it's touching, right? There's more to come. My brother has, in recent years, shot a couple of bears. Talk about no respect for where he came from. In the late 80s, Mom was leaving the Meade River in Canton, New Hampshire after doing some fishing. She came pretty close to a bear who just shook her head as Mom backed away. Between zoos and Clark's trained bears in New Hampshire, I've been fairly close to many bears over the years, but always with a cage or some other barrier between us. I'd seen one crossing Route 89 well ahead of me one day years ago, but it was on July 6th of this year, just 9 weeks ago, an hour before I opened Calling Madam with Amy and Eric, that I came within several yards of a bear with nothing between us but some grass. I was heading from the box office over to the dressing room, and between the dressing room and the bathrooms, there was the bear. It was a youngish bear, not a cub, not a full-grown adult, a teenager perhaps, and fortunately still afraid of humans, as when I said, "Whoa!" it looked at me and said, "Whoa!" and took off into the woods. It was a pretty good minute, actually. Unfortunately, there was no opportunity to take a picture or a video. These are from online, but representative. We've decided we can no longer throw our food scraps outside the dressing room, where they used to draw only red squirrels, chipmunks, and blue jays. Now it seems we would risk being mauled. We have beavers here at the quarry. I captured these tubers in the pond just several yards away. Interesting fact, castoreum, which is secreted from the anal glands of beavers, was used for many years to create a raspberry flavor in food and drink. So if you're old enough, you probably need some anal gland juice. I don't imagine it was obtained merely by asking Bucky to back up to a container and express himself. Certainly these days we have other options for such flavoring processes. Oh, that reminds me, at intermission, we have some great all-natural, humanely produced raspberry pork water. It's damn delicious. Though I haven't photographically captured any, I've seen in my life many a muskrat, which looks like a beaver who's had cosmetic surgery on his teeth and tail. And while I've never witnessed them here, my frequent on-stage romantic partner, Amy Papineau, has seen here otters in the waters with their daughters. Don't ask me how she knew they were daughters. When my eldest nephew was little in the late aughts, Dad, now Papa, began to tell the tale of how baby Casey was found with fur all over him in a rabbit hole. Everybody loves somebody sometime. Well before that, though, I played Peter Rabbit in the first grade production under the direction of Mrs. Allison. When the third graders laughed as I caught my coat at Mr. McGregor's fence, that's when the acting bug bit me. More about bugs later in the show. I reprised the role in an 11-minute monologue I wrote in the early 20-teens called Peter Out, in which an elderly Peter Rabbit bemoans his woeful existence. And also in the early and middle teens, I recorded voiceovers of Who's Rabbit for 2 subsequent puppet productions, the second of which I also acted as puppeteer to a recording of my own voice. I don't believe there are very many hares in the areas in which I live, so it's mostly rabbit, rabbit. Here's a groundhog on the left, also known as a woodchuck. Does anyone know how much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? Ramona Godfrey had the answer earlier. And in the middle here is the only gopher I've spent a lot of time watching. And though I've seen some ferrets and minks in my day, here's a video that our groundskeeper, set designer, everything else, Matt Mead, took outside Michael Stukenmel's home this year of a chicken killer. Since we just come off the musical Call Me Madam, which originally, Amy's wonderful role was played by a big Broadway belter in the 1950 production, I decided to call her Ethel Erman. For years, I've thought of gray squirrels as city folk and red squirrels as country folk because that's where I saw them for the most part. This squirrel in the upper left, 1989, when I moved to New York City, in Central Park. It was great to see him there. Seeing the trees and the squirrel made me think I was in New England again, because all the animals I'd seen in Central Park that size, until that squirrel, were rats. But a wildlife official recently explained to me that gray squirrels tend to stay in and around deciduous trees, and reds prefer living where there are more evergreens. I had a gray squirrel friend during college, all through college. She was there for years and came to see us and eat right near us when we offered snacks. Once she even brought her babies to show us. Look, these are the humans who were feeding us. We initially named her Acela Carita, broken Italian for wounded armpit. Italian because we first fed her cooked macaroni and she looked like she had a wound. It turned out to be just her markings. She even grew to recognize the name we called her. And I was there for 4 straight years. I worked at St. Michael Playhouse every summer. And then I graduated, and I was away for 8 or 9 months till I came back to the Playhouse. And I was on campus calling at every gray squirrel. Acela Carita? Who the hell is she? One said. Acela Carita, do you think we all look alike? Acela Carita, I'll tell you, said hello. Finally, across the green near the theater, which is where I used to see her most. Acela Carita? And she bounded over to me. And I don't have any pictures of her, but here are some squirrels I caught in the act. On a garden shed where I live in Burlington. Normally vocal for a gray squirrel, but there was a rabbit in the next yard who was pulling focus. And at the hospital I worked at in Burlington, there's a little dumpster diver. And here's a little guy I brought to a refuge in Henniker, New Hampshire. He was seemingly orphaned at my folks' place. I've lifted a few deceased red squirrels out of the road and tossed them into the woods, to your soul. In fact, one just yesterday, Quarry Road. But most I've seen have been alive and well. One here in the middle at Red Rocks Park in Burlington. One right outside here acting like a statue, until he's not. Then he strikes his pose. It's like, oh, strike pose. Nothing to it. Watch it. Every pose known as the red squirrels.
Yep.
And one on the roadside somewhere. It's nice to see on the right here the chipmunk and the red squirrel convening for a common purpose. These were our leftovers when we used to have meals from the steakhouse, and those are their dinner rolls. And the red squirrel takes away a dinner roll that is, frankly, as big as its own body. Those dinner rolls went like hotcakes. Not to our actors, obviously. And one day, some years ago here at the theater, I heard, oh, here's a couple others, but I heard a noise coming from a trash can out there, a big plastic trash can, with a hole chewed in the lid. And here's what I found. They're more vocal, definitely. And just a couple of weeks ago, right here, I went to see where oh no, that's the next one. When my youngest nephew was little, guess what? That's right, Papa made up another origin story. Like Chipmunk Charlie, chipmunks are cute, quick, nutty rascals, but just occasionally you can get them to slow down enough to get close. My friend Michael had a couple eating out of his hands in Colchester, and I got to meet and feed and pet one. And there's one in the woods. And just a couple of weeks ago, right over there, I went to see where I'd thrown some leftovers into the woods. I saw a chippy run into one of two short pipes. I wasn't sure which pipe it was until I picked up the second and saw corn and rice from our leftovers fall out. Wasn't expecting that ride. I've seen some possums, or opossums, though I've never snapped any pics, but they'll snap any ticks. So let's keep them alive, okay? And I just read last week that if a skunk is digging in your yard, it's probably to eat the larvae of yellow jackets or other such pests. So stay away and we'll let them do their work for us. Okay, I've got a lot more to say about skunks, maybe the most to say about any animals until dogs and cats. There's a song we sang growing up in the car on trips, and nobody had ever heard of it, and I finally was validated when I found an old folk songbook and it was in there. I gave it to my musician sister-in-law. But now you can find lots of videos on YouTube about it, different versions, and this is kind of what we sang, although I interpolated from a different version, a lyric I like better. Sing along if you know it. Oh, I stuck my head in a little skunk's hole, and the little skunk said, bless my soul, take it out, take it out, take it out, remove it. But I wouldn't take it out, so the little skunk said, if you don't take it out, you'll be filled with dread. Take it out, take it out, take it out, remove it. But I wouldn't take it out, so the little skunk said, if you don't take it out, you'll wish you were dead. Take it out, take it out, take it out, remove it. But I wouldn't take it out, so the little skunk said, psst. I removed it. In cribbage, a skunk is good for the victor and bad luck for the loser. A couple weekends ago, I got skunked by my sister-in-law, and the next morning I skunked my dad. When Dad was a boy in his early double digits, he had a pet skunk. Descendant, of course, named Lucky. They would let Lucky outside loose, where he'd sometimes commune with the wild skunks. Eventually, he decided to join the stench. That's one word for a group of skunks. They took him into the array, another term, even though he didn't smell quite right to them. Just as well as Dad said Lucky was getting to be a bit aggressive. Dad's an old fart now, but even as a young father, his farts have usually stunk like a skunk. He was here last Friday, he did not deny it. When we'd comment on it, he'd say, it's not me, boys, it's Lucky, saying hello to me from across the rainbow bridge. We argued that Lucky had been descented, and Dad reminded us that in heaven, all our wounds are healed. These days, we've abbreviated our response to Dad's odoriferous outburst by just holding our noses, rolling our eyes, and saying, Lucky. When I was 8, I went over to the home of my girlfriend, Jennifer Paul, bounded up the front steps and knocked on the door. As I waited for a response, I looked behind me and a skunk was passing back and forth in front of the steps. Hello? I called into the house as the inner door was open, but the screen door was locked. Priscilla, Jen's mom, called out, Gary, use the side door to the kitchen. We just waxed the floor in the living room. But Mrs. Paul, I don't recall how long I had to wait until I ran into the side of the house, hoping the skunk wouldn't chase me and squirt. Not long after that, I dreamt that I was next to another neighbor's house, and a skunk was there. In the dream, I did the Barbara Eden genie arms folded magic head bob, and the skunk vanished. I dreamed of Genie, huh? In the 16 years I lived on North Avenue in Burlington, I saw many skunks, often after I heard of the tail, and I just kept walking. Weeks ago, I saw, on the below left here, I saw my friend Jay's video of her backyard on Shore Road in Burlington. Whole family there. Can I borrow that for my animal show coming up? Sure, here it is. Great, I don't have any skunk footage of my own. Ask, and you shall receive. 22 hours before I saw the bear out there, several yards from the bear, I got my wish. The first skunk any of us have seen up here. Only about 18 inches from me as it passed. It didn't look up at me, standing still like a statue with my camera, though it did notice me from a distance as it lunched on the crunchy croutons we tossed. And here's footage of my chipmunk training friend in Colchester petting a skunk that he was feeding for several nights. To be fair, he was still a pothead at the time.
she let me pet her for the first time about a week ago.
He calls her my skunk salt.
But I haven't pet her since. She seems to be doing all right. I wasn't even sure she'd be back when I got home, but I'll give it a go here in a second. She'll either let me or she won't, but I think she will. She's pretty calm. She's letting me pet her.
Frankly, though, if you put some food in front of me, I'll let you have me. I won't pay attention to what else is going on. Many say it's a still a myth that they don't exist. But 4 years ago, this month, this week perhaps, last week, when preparing for my September one acts, I was the distance I am now from the back wall of the theater, away from the catamount crossing the driveway. And just last year, my co-star Cassandra Seabird saw one in the village, so it could be the same one. I said, hey, as I reached in my pocket for the phone. I had to open first with a code before opening the camera app and aiming for a shot. It looked at me and kept going to its destination. Just as well that I didn't get a still shot or video. It might have been the last footage I took. But what a story that would have been. Here lies the remains of Rick Ames. And here lies the remains of Rick Ames. And here lies the remains of Rick Ames. Rest in pieces. Talk about remains to be seen. I trust that Eric R. Hill would have turned it into a future spooky fall show, The Fangs of the Ferocious Feline. I have no novel footage to offer of raccoons, though I did see one nearby on Galveston Hill Road one night weeks ago. However, by the time I backed up to get a digital record, it had gone into the woods. I was reminded of camping during college at Burlington's North Avenue campground. As we sat on one side of the picnic table facing our fire, a bold trash man had come up the other side to steal our pack of hot dogs and the chocolate bars for our planned s'mores. Later that night, we were kept awake by a bunch of raccoons who had dragged our clothes and button-locked play school cooler down into the woods as they fought over it and tried in vain to get at what was inside. Mom tells the story of when she was young Jeannie Stenson in New Hampshire. She was headed to the barn and saw a cat near the incinerator. As she got closer to see whose cat it was, it hissed at her, and she realized it was not a cat after all. I didn't see a roadrunner anywhere in my travels, but on May 21, 2021, on my way down 89 in Vermont, en route to Queens, New York, to visit a huge cemetery, I saw a wily coyote looking across the southbound lanes at some piece of roadkill. Not wanting him to become roadkill himself, I pulled over, got the carcass onto some cardboard, waited for traffic, and carried it across to the forest median for him to enjoy at his leisure and safely. How's that for Uber Eats? My mother said I was stupid to do this. What stupid is this? What was I going to do if it came over to me? I've seen a few foxes around the country here, and even in Burlington. We all know what a red fox looks like, don't we? Not that one. Or that other one, though my friend Sam Harrington's maiden name, Rogers, is an Americanized version of Großfuchs, German for red fox. Just out of college in 1995, working part-time in Franklin, New Hampshire's K&M Sports and Tobacco, I aided and abetted the murders of thousands of animals, I'd imagine, by selling hunting and fishing licenses, ammo, worms and other lures, occasional fishing rods, and weaponry. We had a big scale outside behind the store, and I had to help a couple of hundred drag dead deer off their trucks to weigh them. I came back in once with blood on my wrist. This stigmata, along with the dolphin fish, mahi-mahi, and buffalo burgers we sold at my waitering job at Madeline's, convinced me to become a vegetarian, to try my best to nourish myself without eating dead animal products. 28 years out next week, I seem to have succeeded. I'm certainly not wasting away. Here's a young bull moose and a picture my mom took years ago. I saw a similar moose about a decade or so hence on Route 11 in Andover, New Hampshire, walking amongst soft traffic. Other than that, maybe just a couple of glimpses of rear ends disappearing in the woods. Dad came home with the first deer he shot and said, "Boys, Jeannie, I gotta go!" It wasn't tied to the hood. Where is it? It was in the trunk of our Volkswagen Beetle. True, it was an adult, but clearly the runt of the litter. My little bro exclaimed, "You killed Bambi!" Years later, my dear late godfather, Uncle Ronnie, brought by a buck on a truck that he or my cousin Dan had shot. Ron was disappointed in my lack of reaction, stating, "You'd be excited if you took more interest in it." Well, yeah. Here are a few deer I've seen in Montpelier and Adamant in the last few years. At the St. Augustine Cemetery off of Main Street in Montpelier, it was the beginning of COVID. It hadn't been mown because the inmates generally did that, and that wasn't happening during COVID. And so there was very tall grass. I saw a couple of spotted fawns pop up and run away. I didn't get a picture of them. But then I saw this spike-horn, and I did get lots of video of him, very patient and eating that tree. And see on the left video, when I ask him a question, I think he answers it.
How are you? Were those your fawns who went running?
Didn't he just nod?
Yeah.
Hello?
There he is, some more, very patient. And when I talked to the man who lived near the cemetery as I left, I said, "I saw these great deer in the cemetery." And he said, "Yeah, they're eating my plants all the time. The city won't let me shoot them. The animals run this city."
Hey,
And then here are some right down the quarry road.
hello?
They all know me as that human who says hello a lot.
Hello? Hello?
There he is again, Mr. Hello. And here's an early Christmas present for you, a reindeer I saw when I was a child. Unfortunately, he neither had a red nose nor did he fly. Welcome to the jungle. That's all I know that song. Okay, so I've never been in a real jungle yet, but here are some animals I encountered whose natural habitat is the jungle. If you ride on the spine of an elephant, are you its backpacky drum? And I was brave and rode on a smaller elephant all by myself. Granted, Daddy and Timmy were flying right ahead. We saw some tigers from a distance, became tigers ourselves, and shook hands with a tiger. Although, did we become tigers ourselves in that cage, or is it supposed to look like the tigers have swallowed us? I think that's more what it is. I could only find one picture of myself with a lion, although there is some footage of me right here on stage with a lion, Eric R. Hill, as the lion in The Wizard of Oz, who said, "What, Eric?" Oh, that's right. And I was the scarecrow a long time ago. But here is a picture of me with a lion. It was the closest I ever came to being in a jungle. An asphalt jungle, New York City, 1989. One of two outside the public library. He had a lot of patience with me, that's his name, patience. And I had the great fortitude, the name of the other, to not get yelled at by any authorities. I'm more respectful of sculpture these days. And that's an orangutan I still have. His name is George. He was shipped to me by my godmother, Aunt Karen, in the late 80s, because when we were in Quincy Market in the early 80s, I was visiting her, and we went to a puppet kiosk and bought one that looked just like him, a little smaller, his sister, Orpha. And we carried Orpha around Boston, and I was animating her, and people said, "Is that real?" You know, from a distance. We got on the tee with her, we rode to Five Face in the search for some clothing for her, and the sales girl was talking to her like, "You like this little dress, honey?" "Oh, I can't believe I'm talking to that puppet." What's that? Yes, that is Amy. Yeah, he was in the audience. During 2x2 years ago, we put pairs of animals in the audience, and I asked my aunt to send me Orpha from Massachusetts so she could sit in the audience with two orangutans. Yeah, that is Amy from that show. Yes, her hair is grayer these days, but so is mine. That's right. Yeah, no, she's still with us. She's wonderful. You have to wait. You can wait. They can wait. You can wait. Just do it on the chair if you have to. Jan will clean it up. At St. Michael's Playhouse in the early 90s, I was called upon as properties designer to rustle up some African animal heads to hang on the set of the Agatha Christie play, The Unexpected Guest. It actually says in the stage directions, this guy who was dead in the chair at the beginning of the show was an African hunter, and there are African animal heads. Amazingly, my crew took my advice to call sporting goods stores in Chittenden County, and they found a married couple in the same town of Colchester who had gone on an African hunt as their honeymoon, a condition of the wife accepting his proposal. Now, had they talked about this beforehand, or did they just say, "Were you married, honey?" "Yes, as long as you take me to Africa to kill some innocent animals." So there's certainly some of the most elaborate set dressing I ever obtained They are also likely one of the influences that led me to my dietary lifestyle. I hope someday to see these magnificent creatures in living form, perhaps even in their natural habitat. I haven't ruled it out. I have my passport. So far, so good. You've heard wordplay galore as I've shared my lore of yore, but now I'll speak to one of my most amazing experiences with animals, so amazing that I recently wrote a verse just for this occasion. Let me delve, for it hardens. I was 12 at Busch Gardens with my bumpa and nanny, step gramps, and my gran. The plan we've been crafting began with some rafting on man-made whitewaters, got neck cramps, then the tramp. Still, I craned my sore neck, saying, what in the heck? That's the biggest darn poop that I ever done seen. But I made a big gap, for, don't laugh, the giraffe in the distance gave existence to one who she'd weaned. Yes, with mirth, 'twas a birth that she dropped to the earth. Quite a scene on the green, if you know what I mean. That's how I first witnessed the miracle of life. I was witness, the fitness, the strain, and the strife, right there with my dad's old stepdad and his wife. At that point, Dad could no longer tell me any story about how it. I've seen it, Dad. I thought it was a poop, but I realized later. Because we just barely left the jungle, let me hear some bird noises, please. Pretty good. Quite a cacophony there. I will start with this fine feathered fellow. It's hard to know whether to put him under pets, as he was certainly domesticated. Of all the animals I've shown so far in pictures from my youth, he's the only one who might possibly still be alive, given that macaws can live 35 to 50 years in captivity. So I'm 53, so if he was very young then he's going to die any day now. At Muddy Brook near my home, and at Adamant Pond near my home away from home, ducks are down to hang in either place. Matt B tells me that these on the right are probably two different families of ducks. They're all ducklings, but the bigger ones met the smaller ones who had been separated from their brood, and they took them under their wings. Canada geese have varied tastes. Some like to hang out on the beach at Lake Champlain. Others like to lounge around on Adamant Pond. And one flock even likes to hang in an Underhill boneyard, proving the adage that cemeteries are so spooky they can give themselves goosebumps. But when these lovers make the most noise is when they're flying together, sometimes south for the winter, other times just from one pond to another. But sometimes they're entirely silent, like when they're walking to high school in Montpelier on Bailey Avenue. And only a couple of them have not learned to keep on the silent. But they did all look both ways, so they know that. The saddest part, as seen here at Winooski, are the geese who are land-bound with the oxymoronic condition of ankle wing from having eaten or often been fed too much bread or other carbs, or they're otherwise injured, like this one in Georgia once, with a bad leg. It can certainly swim, not sure if it can land, take off or land anymore. Maybe it was a bad landing that hurt its leg. Here are the celebrated swans of Squanton, Vermont, and a picture of that one time that Mommy and Timmy and I all rode on a swan. I could have added a swan song here, but it didn't seem to be the right time. When I was still a drinker 30 years ago, I had more than my share of Wild Turkey Kentucky Straight Bourbon whiskey, but I much prefer the avian friend to nobody's friend. On one trip to the quarry in the season past, I witnessed a family with 2 adult females, turned out the males take off after doing their duty, and several babies crossing the road. One of the mothers must have been from Massachusetts because she said, "Oh, look out kids, there's a car coming." A cow? No, a car. 2 weeks later, they were half the size of the adults. 2 weeks later, you couldn't tell who were the mothers and who were the kids. How much wood could a woodpecker peck if a woodpecker could peck wood? Y'all didn't know the answer to the groundhog question, so I'm going to take it, woodchuck. Cardinals are abundant in our area, and they remind us of lost loved ones. I saw the smaller white heron in Burlington on the Winooski River. And the great blue heron I captured on media down the quarry road here at the neighbor's pond. There seem to be more yummy frogs to eat there, but you'll also see that great blue up here if you're lucky. At one cemetery, I saw a robin meticulously preening herself. In the woods, I caught another bird flitting about, and an educated audience member last week told me it's definitely a goldfinch. And In another cemetery, I saw well over 100 more birds all in one fall swoop. I know the word in the expression is fell, but as you can see, none of them did, and it was autumn. Year after year, here at the quarry, the robins make their nests and lay their eggs. Most of them hatch, but some of them don't hatch or don't survive once they're kicked out of the nest. I have a Modge Podge abandoned nest right in front of the screen here with an unhatched egg. That's probably the biggest bunch of eggs in one nest I ever saw. They didn't all hatch. And on the top right, you can anticipate that this is a chick flick, but it's actually a chick trick flick. Yes, I played a trick. I may have a career in bird imitation. I wasn't feeling too bad. I knew the parent would be back soon with a worm or something. And actually, I tried regurgitating some gummy worms. They didn't want them. And the one on the right, Harold's feathers, was a little grown up, but the mother was still swooping at me and clawing, or not clawing exactly, but squawking, saying, "Be careful with my baby." On January 8, 2020, at approximately 1:30 in the morning in Burlington, about 1,000 crows landed like heavy hailstones on the roof of my building. And it wasn't hail season exactly. I live on the 3rd and top floor. They landed in silence other than a boom, 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 but no clawing. Shortly thereafter, they took off. We wondered if they were a harbinger of the pandemic that was coming. I wrote an epic poem titled Murder Most Foul, but it's too long and wordy to share with you here. I know you're thinking this is too long and wordy to share with us here, Rick, but let's consider it's that much shorter. This is a young pigeon abandoned by its parents who wasn't flying away from me in my home's yard, so I took it for a refuge in South Burlington, only to be told it was perfectly fine. I helped rescue a baby pigeon in the ceiling tiles above my hospital office in the late teens. I took a picture that same day in Central Park in '89 that I took the picture of the squirrel. I took a picture of a pigeon who had pecked its way through a full slice of Wonder White and was hopping about with it hanging around its neck like a priest's album. Talk about the Holy Grail. I wish I could have located that picture. My favorite pigeon episode, though, was walking by my Professor Don Rathgeb's office in St. Michael's College McCarthy Arts Center to see a pigeon sitting on his desk chair. For just a moment, we imagined someone had cast a spell, as it looked suspiciously like our mentor, goatee, squint, and all. The only doves I've really seen have been on bars of soap, the only emu on a series of insurance commercials. I've seen a lot of hawks and some turkey vultures, but have no stimulating stories to tell of them. And I saw one bald eagle flying over Route 89. The same day, I later heard an amazing story from a Vietnam vet about his disabled son, who wished when he died to return in the spirit as an eagle. And the man then saw a flyby of a bald eagle the day after his son's memorial service. But I have a story about a hummingbird, which happened to take place in the hall right outside of Don Rathgeb's office. Mom had come to pick me up in mid-August of 1995 after the playhouse season was over, and I had a standing gramophone I bought at a yard sale and put in her car, which had been waiting in the hall outside of the main theater. I propped open the door to the outside to load it out, and a hummingbird flew in. I didn't want it to stay in there, as it could get into the huge space of the theater if someone opened that door and end up dying there with nothing to eat and no way out. As it hovered near the fluorescent lights, it was tiring, its wings flapping more slowly. I grabbed a box, about the size of this one, and tried to get it into the box. I got it in, and without trying to close it in with the flaps, walked the box toward the exit, hoping to just stay in there. As I walked, the bird popped up under the front flop of the box, seeming to know I was carrying it to freedom. Once we were outside, it took off. The next day, 150 miles away in Sanford, New Hampshire, as I looked out my parents' kitchen window, where there were no feeders, a hummingbird flew up to the window, hovered there, and took off. Was it the same bird I had rescued the day before who followed me all the way home? Or even hopped under the car somewhere to stow away? Or was it a relative, perhaps, come to thank me for the good deed it had heard I'd done? I guess I'll never know. I couldn't exclude one of our favorite pests. Why is it called the seagull in Burlington when it lives near a lake? What's it called when it lives near the bay? That's right. Seeing a dead bird is never fun, and it's even worse when you're carrying a wounded bird to get it some water and it dies in your hands. Though some have said I was meant to be with it to usher it to the other side. To your soul. Let's end the ornithology portion on a pheasant note. Well, not that exactly. Actually, I quail to show you these two because I'm just not sure what they are. But they're fun to watch. And actually, the educated audience member told me they were guinea hens. It was only reviewing this video years ago that I realized I had the radio on, this was playing. But finally, at the end of this, the birds hear the music, start popping along and go pop. You'll see. The rhythm is going to get you. You get it? I almost forgot. Though I haven't often seen them in the wild, here are some of my favorite owls. Help Woodsy spread the word. Don't be a dirty bird. In the city or in the woods, help keep America looking good. One of my favorites. Turtles are plentiful in central Vermont. On the left is a snapper I coached out of the road a few years ago right here in Calais. One of three I got out of harm's way in a matter of 3 years. I stopped to help with another in Burlington, and the guy said, I got it! He was picking it up by its tail to avoid getting snapped. Don't do that. It can dislocate the tail and cause lifetime pain to the turtle, and you can still get snapped. They've got long necks. In the middle is the most common one we see here at the quarry.
This little creature was in the middle of the road, and I got it out of the road, and now it's headed to safety.
I pick them up and I carry them, and they move their legs, and they take their head in, and they pee on me a lot, not on me, but on the ground. And I say, I'm just taking you to safety, I'm a vegetarian, don't worry. We have some, like the ones on the bottom right, painted turtles. And the top right is one that made it up from the lake to my office parking lot on King Street in Burlington, 2 blocks. I brought Shelley back down to the boat slips and slipped her in. To be fair, the sign in my workplace does read Champlain Housing Trust, so she may have been confused after some heavy rains. But my favorite turtle of all is known as Plautus, or Lightning, after the 2 characters the box turtle played in the scenes from 1809 and 1990 in Tom Stoppard's Arcadia and Northern State in September of '97. We auditioned several turtles. We tried some that were water turtles, and they would just run to the end of the table and try to go off and get grabbed. This one stayed on the table, so we used it. And he was on the large dining room table throughout the show. As the play began, he was alone on stage. And on opening night, from the wings, I watched. When the lights came up, he was in his shell, but when the lights came up, he stretched his neck out and looked at the audience. He was a consummate performer. He did have a couple of accidents, though. One time, while performing next to him, I noticed he had pooped on the table. Another time, in my peripheral vision, as I speechified, I saw a virtual flood issue out from under him. I had a hard time saying in character that. But for the rest of the performances, he kept it contained. It's worth noting that the larger original production of the piece noted in the script, turtle on, turtle off, meaning they were using an electronic remote control turtle. Not everyone was as brave as we were. The turtle still lives with our costumer, Ravina Darcy Fox, and may be older than either she or I, or any of you. On a nature walk with my folks in 2020, we saw a number of what we coined orange salamanders in the wet woods. But my educated audience member last weekend told me they were red F's, EFT, which are young newts. By the way, I hadn't seen, last newt I'd seen was Newt Gingrich. So, we saw a lot of them in the wet woods. Like Indiana Jones, but less famously, my dad is not a fan of snakes. I remember him when I was a child in our yard, chopping a huge snake in half with an axe in our yard. But in thinking about it, it was a garter snake and it was a hatchet. It was just, I was a boy. My friend Sonia and I were exploring a railway trail and met this slithery specimen who gladly posed for us. It took me a long time to get him to stick his tongue out at me because he had been taught by his mother not to stick his tongue out. Some months later, we were in upstate New York on a small mountain exploring the ruins of a dance hall when we came across an 8-foot-long black rat snake. Didn't know what it was at the time, but it seemed more afraid of us than we were of it. And so as it slithered away finally, I had to touch the very tip of its tail, just to say I did. When my parents hiked up with me to the Cove, a pond at Rockefeller State Park, we happen upon mating season of the frogs, although we heard it first. What is that sound? So many frogs, so much mating. You see this one on the left. That's his own mating call shortly. Working up to it. And here are some other frogs I've seen in my many walks in the woods. Sing along if you like.
Froggy went a-courting and he did ride on. Froggy went a-courting and he did ride on. Froggy went a-courting and he did ride something, something by his side. Froggy went a-courting and he did ride on.
Does anybody know what the something something is? Sword and pistol. Probably didn't come to me because I'm a pacifist. These are my pacifists. And then there are toads. There's one here at the quarry on the left. And when our young performer Bella caught one here a couple of weeks ago, seen holding the picture in the middle, she asked if she could come up on stage during my show here and tell the story. Basically, the gist is that it peed on her. When she was here last weekend, I let her tell the audience that herself from her seat. She has thankfully washed her hands since then. That guy on the right, he's no toad. He's my 7th grade honors science teacher, Mr. Kreider, perhaps looking disappointed at the young photographer who turned in a paper on the bullfrog, which earned me a D-. It was honors science, and he probably wasn't allowed to give me an F. I apparently didn't keep that paper, but I still have the next paper for that class about the Homo sapien, for which I was given an A-. Of course, my mom helped me a lot in assembly, and I don't mean just those 3 statements. When one leaves QuarryWorks on a rainy night, driving down the road is like the reverse of the video game Frog. There's one car and lots of frogs, and you're trying desperately to avoid running over any of them. My friend Carol Benson taught me to toss roadkill off the road, stating, "To your soul," as I do. With these frogs, I'm driving along like, "To your soul, to 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 your soul. We can never fill the hole that you left. We're bereft from existence, you've been left." Maybe I'll finish that song 15 years from now. Or your son of a bug. Get away. There's paradise lost and parasites found. In my life, I've had lots of dog ticks on me and dogs and cats to remove, some with gasoline, a just burnt match head, or tweezers when it came to it. Thankfully, I've had fewer deer ticks, except when I had a flat tire on the side of Route 89 in New Hampshire 2 Memorial Days ago, and after I stepped off the shoulder into ankle-high grass to see a man about a horse, I picked 6 deer ticks off my bare legs. That bug in the middle, I'm not sure what it is, but it was on my neck one day. Center bottom is the palmetto bug I mentioned stomping in New York City 34 years ago. And on either side of it, head lice and crab lice. I can't recall if I had both, but I know I definitely had one of them. I wrote this paragraph about spiders while sitting here on stage with my laptop, having just seen a daddy long legs outside the building. However, those are nothing compared to some of the bigger spiders I've seen here and elsewhere. The first 2 here are taken in a tunnel used to store dynamite under the railroad tracks in Burlington during the time that the construction of the railroad was happening. And the snail was one of several I saw while I was picking up trash in Intervale on Green Up Day one year. I tried to pick up that shell, and he slugged me. Mosquitoes don't bite me often, but they certainly bug me. Mom is proud that I could spell the word very early in life. And fleas have been an issue with some cats and dogs in my life. During that giraffe birthing trip to Sarasota in the early 80s, I let my grandparents' pug, Sarah, sleep with me. And for a short time, I had fleas of my own. What a circus that was. As with wild turkeys, I much prefer the real thing to the alcoholic grasshopper drinks I got drunk on while performing in a murder mystery cruise on Winnipesaukee in '91. And who can tell me what a cricket sounds like? I know I can. When you wish upon a star, it makes no difference who you are. Well, at least one famous cricket sounds like that. Dragonflies are fun to look at. I don't mind letting a housefly sit and clean itself on my hand or leg. But here at QuarryWorks, horseflies arrive in June by the droves. Here's one hanging out on the X of Phillips Experimental Theater right outside those doors. I have a huge head, you noticed, and they buzz around me like satellites in orbit. Of course, when my Uber Mass-born mother talks about these two, it's hard to distinguish if she's saying housefly or housefly. We also have a lot of hornets here at the quarry. Mostly they congregate atop those bathroom doors in October when they're too sluggish to fly or sting, and I end up killing every one to prevent any anaphylactic shock among you all. First I spray them with Braid, to your soul, to your soul, to your soul, to your soul, and then I vacuum them up. Actually, I just realized this year I could vacuum up instead of picking them up. To your soul, to your soul, to your soul, to your soul. But here's a picture of an absolutely huge hornet right outside the theater. Prepare yourselves. See the door you just came into the theater? Look at how big that is. All right, I cannot tell a lie. That's our donation box. Not all insects make us recoil. Some are lovely to watch, like this one. What is it? I know it's hard to tell in this fuzzy video, and it's not necessarily that bug making that noise. It's good to see that the bees in our area are still going strong. And butterflies, the ones on either side, are monarchs. And what does the monarch sing, Eric? I, for the king of the forest. Monarchs really are the king or the queen, anyway. Now the monarch is a king. And moths are lovely to look at, even when they're dead, as on the left. But even though it's dead, can't you see it watching you? Those eyes, I always feel like somebody's watching me. I didn't provoke this stink bug to release its odor when I saw it out here weeks ago. Does anyone know what the one in the middle is? I'm not sure that's a bug, but it was dead if it was. And last year we had these bothersome Asian lady beetles all over the theater, in the dressing room, some flying around and landing on us as we performed. They are not as wonderful as their near lookalikes, the ladybugs. Before they morph into butterflies or moths, caterpillars are fun to look at. But don't touch the one in the middle, the hickory tussock, whose black hairs can give you a severe rash. We have some here at the quarry, so watch out. I just saw one yesterday. No bare feet out there. This next section will delve deep into fresh and salt water to explore fish, crustaceans, arthropods, and even mammals. I come from a long line of fisher people, and you can see that Timmy and I enjoyed catching and not releasing when we were young. But the picture on the lower right more accurately depicts my feelings about it nowadays. Still, I don't condemn fishing and hunting by omnivorous humans so long as they eat what they kill. I practice what I practice, but I'm selective about what I preach. These days, if I see a fish swimming about, I still try to catch it, just digitally. Talk about a live stream. Speaking of which, if you're worried about a live stream, less than 10 minutes till intermission. In the spring of 2005, when we were at a family timeshare in Homosassa Springs, Florida, with my brother's girlfriend, who would become my sister-in-law, Lee, and my former boyfriend, Bill, who's still a big part of my life. Dad and Bill went out kayaking together. We had seen captive manatees and wild ones just outside the enclosure at a wildlife reserve earlier that day. But when they were kayaking, Dad looked beside him and saw Bill's kayak seemingly beginning to levitate off the water until he realized it was a manatee which had come up directly underneath Bill's craft. I would have loved to have been there with Dad and Bill. That would have been an uplifting experience. But no, I had to gash my right ring finger on an oyster shell trying to get my kayak into the water. The finger I had already had a skin graft to save years before. But that's a story for another time. On an oyster! Ah, shucks! Talk about a pearl of wisdom. Although it sounds shellfish, I know what you're thinking about my mouth right now. That's one muscle I would like Rick to clamp up. Many a time until 1995, I used nutcrackers and wooden mallets to break into lobsters and soft-shell crabs. But that was for sustenance, not just senseless violence. Though I've been there, too. I wasn't always kind to animals. Perhaps that's why I've been trying to atone all these years now. In the early 80s, when I lived in Delaware, my class took an overnight camping trip to Cape Pendleton. On the beach, we saw many horseshoe crabs mating, connected, one behind the other. Several of us grabbed a rear male by the tail, picking them both up in that manner, swung them around, and flung them into the bay water. That's the most exciting sex any of us ever had. We were in 8th grade. None of us had ever had any sex. Later, we took a walk out with a net, barefoot, with many of them moving under our feet. It was nerve-wracking. I expected to be sliced by their spiny tails, revenge for what I'd done earlier to their shell-shocked relatives. We then went out on a fishing boat. The fisherman reeled in a small shark, a dogfish, then clubbed it, chopped off its head, chopped off its tail, gutted it, skinned it, and put it in a small freezer while the meat was still quivering, all in a matter of seconds. Though I caught fish before and eventually had to clean them, this brutal process more clearly illustrated humanity's inhumanity to non-humanity. As teens in the mid-'80s in central New Hampshire, my bro had a BB gun. We did some record shooting out in the woods, shooting at old LPs we hung on by our poles on tree rings stuff. But as we walked through the woods, we saw a small snake and took turns shooting it so many times that we shot it in half. Later, my brother aimed up at a small bird on a limb, meaning to just frighten it away with a close BB shot. But he hit the bird. It bounced off one limb and another before coming to the ground when we realized he had shot the beam right off. Some kids caught lightning bugs or fireflies and put them in jars with air holes. Other kids rubbed the bugs' rear ends on their sneakers to make their footwear glow very briefly. Though it was not a regular occurrence, at least a couple of times, I was one of those other kids. Those are the only incidents of animal cruelty in which I was involved. At least the only ones which I remember. I'm still so sorry for having taken part in them. Heck, when I fished as a kid, I didn't even want to skewer the worm with the hook, let alone yank it from the lip of a fish I caught to later disembowel. Well, now's your chance to use the facilities or even gallop away if you must. See you shortly. Well, welcome back. Thanks for staying. The second half's a little shorter, I promise. Let's go. I hope we'll talk about this here in a little bit. I hope you've had a chance to do your business. Now sit, stay, paw, speak. Yeah. I've been called a horse whisperer, a dog whisperer, a cat whisperer, which is funny because, as you can imagine, I don't often whisper. And even when I do, it's louder than most folks' regular speaking decibels. Of course, we have our backstage voice, which is essentially a whisper, I suppose. Though I love seeing any animals anywhere, except for a petting zoo, it's rare to get to make physical contact with any but domesticated animals. Thankfully, most pets humans are more than willing to let you visit with their dear ones, so long as their dear ones are willing. I'd say I've pet thousands of dogs I've just met, and only one ever bit me. Granted, on the chin when he was aiming for my jugular. And most of the scratches I've had from cats were those I've known very well, mostly playing, some in anger. Before I get to those popular canines and felines, I'll touch base on just a couple of other pets I've had around the house. We had aquarium fish for such a short time in the 80s, it's not worth mentioning. And the only birds we had were abandoned babies we rescued from outdoors and returned there shortly thereafter. Junior year of college, when my bestie Greg and I were living together in a 2-bedroom townhouse after our 2 housemates had consecutively failed out, he brought in his sister's mouse from his parents' house. Squeaky, or Squeaker, was sweet, but in my experience, she didn't squeak much. Instead, though, her plastic wheel on a metal spindle in her cage is what squeaked, for minutes on end, in the middle of the night. I told Greg she was keeping me awake from the other room, and he said, "I'm sorry, Rick, I've said, Squeaky, be quiet," but she doesn't comply. I convinced him that she would be forever disobedient, so we needed to put her wheel on its side at his bedtime so we could both get some sleep. The summer after my brother finished 6th grade, he brought home the science class pet chinchilla, Winston. He was a cute guy who loved to roll around in his white powder to keep his skin in good condition. And talking about putting on a dog, I put on this dog shirt for you. And I got this dog shirt a few months ago in Burlington, and I was wearing some patchwork pants when I bought it. So I put it on, and I had these patchwork pants, quite the clashing. I was on Church Street, and a young woman panhandling said to me, "You have any weed you can give me?" And I said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, I stopped smoking over 7 years ago now." She looked me up and down and said, "Doesn't look like it." I was born to be a dog lover. It's in my genes. Here's my late Uncle Mike as a toddler with Skippy. There's Skeeter from the mid-1940s when Dad was a toddler, and another unidentified Ames pooch. In 1977, my nanny, goat, Florence, told us she was going to buy us a dog from the shelter, without first consulting my parents. They acquiesced, and we adopted Princess Penelope Ames. I couldn't find the one pic I know exists of Timmy and me with Puppy Penny, but here are some pics of her when she was grown. She was a probable black lab border collie mix, and she was just wonderful. Early in the summer of 1986, when she was 9, she was in the road when a driving mother who was checking on her tot in the back seat struck and killed her. When we lived in the suburbs of Wilmington, Delaware, Penny was always on a run, on a leash, but out in the country in New Hampshire, we thought we'd train her to stay out of the road. A few years later, between 90 and 91, in the same little town, my mother, my brother, and then I all killed a dog in motor vehicles. Mine happened closest to home. The dog chased Dad's truck. The same one I hit the cow with 5 years earlier. Talk about bad luck truck. And closest in roughly the same spot, and it got under the tire. When sobbing, I pulled around to see the neighbor holding the dying dog. He said, "We just moved here and it never lived so close to the road. We figured the dog or cat was going to get it sooner or later." I wanted to scream at him, then why was it not on a leash? I seemed more broken out about it than he was. The silver lining was that my brother Tim, who was 18 at the time, came to my bedroom to say he was there to talk with if I needed comfort, as he and Mom had both been through the same thing in recent months. That moment brought us closer together, not that we were far apart to begin with. Later that year, I flew into Manchester from Chicago, where I'd been nearby at a student leadership conference at Notre Dame. Standing outside to greet me was my family with a surprise, our new black lab border collie puppy, Major. We named him after a German shepherd Mom had grown up around, which we had never known, but had heard of. Major brought us such great joy until March 12, 1999, when he passed to the vet's office, where he was waiting to be euthanized with us present the next morning. He was nearly 13, and a liver extract indicated he was full of cancer. Here's one of many songs I've written for beloved pets. I could put together a whole album. Some of you have heard this before, arranged by folk singer Rebecca Padula, my best friend. I put my key in the lock and open the door, but my loving dog isn't there anymore. So I cried, "Why did you have to die, Major?" The next day I wake up and I go downstairs. All that's left of my puppy is a couple of hairs. Oh, I miss him. How I long to kiss him, Major. Now even though I'm sad that he's gone and I grieve he had to move along, it was his time to leave me. I comfort myself with the notion that I'll see him again, my best friend. For the last dozen years he was there with affection, didn't have any fears when I needed protection. He was mine, my darling canine Major. He was someone to walk with to the mailbox and back, also someone to talk with or to curse with a snack. Even though he has died, he is still by my side, Major. I know he had a part, but I'll never forget him. He'll never leave my heart, no, I'll never ever let him. We'll meet each other in another lifetime, though I don't know when. My best friend. Late at night in the dark, when I'm trying to sleep, I can still hear his bark, and I silently weep. In my mind, I try to find Major. I put my key in the lock and open the door. I can't turn back the clock to a time that's before the end of my best friend, Major. The lyric, he was someone to walk with in the mailbox and back, someone to talk with, and their tricks for a snack. I think he was the first one I ever came up to. I had to tell somebody, and I knew he wouldn't let. But at the end, or not in the end, on Golden Pond, for those who saw it, Elizabeth and Cassandra as Ethel and Chelsea. That's interesting, they had the same initials as their characters. They said about my character, Norman is still in mourning for Chum, I'm afraid. Chum is a Labrador Retriever who passed on just 20 short years ago. Major passed on 24 and a half years ago. Still missing. A lot. I have some of his ashes, 2 containers like this. My brother kept some of his ashes in a little bag that he hiked with. Major did some hiking with him. And Tim had a leak in the bag, a little hole, so he was actually dribbling Major along the trail. Dad had Major cremated separately without Mom's permission. Spent a lot of money on it. Mom said, "Why did you do that? That's expensive. We can't afford that." And he said, "I did it for the boys." He did it for all of us. And contrary to what you see in these pictures on the right, Major was not supposed to be on the rug at all. But he always cheated. But after he was cremated, it took us 6 months when we were all together, at a time when we were all together to spread his ashes on the property. And his ashes were in a bag, in a box, in a big popcorn tin that sat in the living room on the rug for 6 months. So he got his way in the end. For 7 years, we didn't have a family dog, despite my and my brother's efforts to convince the folks to get one. We're too busy. We feel bad how much we left Major alone. You boys just want a dog to come running when you come to visit. Well, duh. After Dad's late 2005 bypass and subsequent retirement and increased solitude as Mom still went to work, Bro tricked Dad into stopping at the Humane Society to meet Mom. They told him she was a black lab Dalmatian mix because of the white on each foot. But I still maintain she was a pit bull mix, as every time I've seen a dog who reminds me of Molly, their human tells me they're part pit. She was so devoted to Dad and brought him out of his post-op funk. Sadly, she was epileptic and was only with us for about 5 years. She did some hiking with us too, though. I'd like to think all 3 of our dogs shared the same soul and kept coming back to us in black and white every time. I put that thought into the opening lyrics of "Our stress is less since we've been mollified." She's a major miracle pup. She's a honey, a heavenly hound. She's a penny we found facing up our good luck charms down at town. The gosh and the golly, 'tis surely no folly. She's smart, cute, and jolly. Dan's dear doggy Molly. Now that's what she looked like. Here are just 3 of those pit bull mixes I met who reminded me of Mom. Maybe it was because they were in black and white as well. The one benefit to working at the tobacco and sports shop was that I got to work with growing chocolate lab pup Brooks, and more importantly, her teenage old man brother, Briar Marceau. This picture of him was taken some years before I met him. Briar always knew when I was having a tough time handling a lot of customers, taking utility payments, sending Western Union, selling cigarettes, game licenses, etc., going out back to weigh dead deer. And when I was really stressed, he'd come up to me behind the counter next to the register and sit there so I could pet him. For my song about him, Doggone. My soul is on fire, there's a hole without Briar, and I'd be a liar if I said that I didn't miss him. My heart is aching, breaking, my body is shaking, quaking. My Briar was taken before I had one last chance to kiss him. Also in the early 90s, I met my friend Sam Rogers and her amazing dogs. First, her golden Trapper, who lived to be 13 and was probably the smartest dog I've ever known and may ever know. Though not all pictured here, I've been close to Trapper's son Dickens. Trapper got out one day and impregnated a local terrier. He was smart. And later, Golden's Simba, seen here, and Grayson, who died earlier this year. I saw the remaining Golden Jack Russell mix, Belle, just several days ago. At one time, years ago, Stan said, "Rick, I think you come over here to see my dog more than you do to see me." Well, not more, but maybe just as much. Here are some other friends' dogs I've loved and lost. Penny Wetzel, Tank Stenisak, Bullet Greer, Jay Svensson, Zoe Jones, who performed here on stage with us and her family, the Joneses, before they moved to New Hampshire, and Zoe Samson. Nikita Munger, all pit bull, that girl, who had to be let outside each time I drove up because she was so excited to see me, she peed every time. Ginger Christenard, I called my girlfriend. She was to be 15 in Essex Junction. I used to dog sit her.
Hi, Ginger.
And I'd say, "Give me kiss, give me kiss." She'd like I'd say, "Stop." I'd stop as soon as I said stop. "Okay, all right, stop." Maddie, or Bear, who I found roaming after a lightning storm right down there, brought her to a foster home nearby. Thought I'd never see her again, but I got to see her once more before she passed. Newfoundland, Nigel DiMaggio Hedrick, and teacup Chihuahua, little white long-haired Gracie Foster, 4 pounds, who would have licked my nose until it was gone. Chihuahuas, they say, are barky, but she only barked when you arrived, excited to see you, knocked on the door, bark, 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 but then very quiet. Samoyed Sooner is now later. Wilbur Wilson was named for the pig in Charlotte's Web, and though I only met old Mabel Zyder once, during the half hour she spent lying at my feet while I recorded audio, we were the best of friends. Her human Chris Zyder said, and that was my first meeting with him too, he said, "We can make her move if you want." And I said, "No, there's nothing I want more than to have a dog in my feet." This is our first encounter. Of course, those black lab mixes are black labs. Jeter and Gizmo Niket Shih Tzus, one of which was the only dog I've ever heard of to suffer from COPD. And as human, did all his smoking outside the home. Third-hand smoke is dangerous too. These 2 Shih Tzus were preceded years before by another Swedish Shih Tzu, Jack, not pictured. And this beagle, Digit, came to live in my home at St. Michael's College sophomore year, a campus house. When the head of student affairs said, "Either the dog goes or you do, Rick," he went to live with some friends of the family in New Hampshire. The dog, not the head of student affairs. And nowadays, I am told, at St. Michael's campus, there are about 400 emotional support dogs. But I couldn't have a dog back then. No offense to people who use ESAs, but aren't all animals emotional support animals? If that's not the reason you have them, if you don't love them, you just have them for status, or just because your kids ask for them. Theodora, Teddy, of course, belonged to my my former boyfriend Bill, still a good friend. And he says he's an atheist, but he named her Teddy, which is Greek for Theodora. Theodora is Greek for gift of God. I think it's Greek, maybe wrong. I don't know. But earlier this year, at 5 years old, she had a heart attack after swimming and died. Bill's heart has been partly healed by his new 4-footed son, Pippin, who I haven't met yet. It seems pictures of these are Teddy. And me.
Hi. Hi, Teddy. Hi. Hello.
Noodles Niket in Waterville.
Hi, Noodle.
His near twin, Ollie Robert in South Burlington.
This is Ollie. Ollie is 9. And it reminds me of my friend Noodles.
And Super Hooper Mole.
There you go.
Super Hooper reminds me. When we had our first dog, Penny, I was assigned as a chore to pick up her mess. And Dad called me a certain 4-word nickname. If he was more hip, he might have put it to this tune. Super duper pooper scooper, I've got a job for you. Pick up the doggy do, even though it makes you blue. I always put Penny's poop into empty fluff containers, like this one. And what was odd, between fluffernutter sandwiches and the many whoopie pies my mom made, we never ran out of these containers, which we threw out full of poop. So it seems that Penny was pooping in direct proportion to how much fluff we were consuming. I tried to sell that as a concept for a commercial to the fluff people, but they weren't buying that shit. I have no pictures as proof, but I did perform in a scene in Sweet Charity at UVM in 2000 with a gray collie whose vocal cords had been cut in a ridiculous county in California where she'd been bred on a puppy farm, and it was an ordinance. So to get people's attention, she would chuff and stomp her feet. In our QuarryWorks 2009 production of Kiss Me Kate, Eric was a gangster, but my leading lady and I carried live Yorkshire Terriers around as props of sorts, until our humans didn't bring them for the second Thursday show, so Michael Tubinamel said, "They're out on the show." The recording we kept was from after their dismissal. My friend and former coworker, Karen, sold me her 2016 Prius recently. Here are her late dog, Riley, and her still dogs, Benji and Diesel and Lola. Talk about chihuahuas who like to bark. But there's Riley, in a moment of quietude, playing with Benny. And here's Benji. Now, Benji's not barking much in this video, but he can. He does.
That's Diesel, and the bigger guy is Benji. Hi, Benji. Hi, Diesel. And Lola is barking from inside.
Speaking of Lola, here are 3 more of my friends named Lola. My downstairs neighbor and new girlfriend, Lola Orlo, Lola Smith of Waterbury, and Lola DeFranco of Underhill. This German Shepherd has 3 sisters, Etta, Lucy, and Princess Peach, who also loves Magnolia. And I currently know 3 dogs named Poppy. Petite Poodle Poppy Sheehan.
How did you say that you kind of like that?
Medium-sized therapy dog Poppy Gary's, who works at my office, or hangs out in my office. And Cane Corso English Mastiff mix Poppy Maitland.
Poppy.
She's all grown up now. She works at Ryan's Old North End Auto, along with her older brother Potato, her buddy Maxwell,
Hey, buddy.
and her other pal Benjamin, whose human is a mechanic named Molly Mechanic. Should probably keep her maiden name.
Benny.
Talk about living up to your name.
Yeah, good boy.
It seems Benny's love to fetch because I met this 4-year-old at a yard sale in Montpelier a couple of weeks ago.
That's 4-year-old Benny. Here at the yard sale.
Queenie Panage loves to walk herself.
Hi. Bring me that leash. Hey. Oh, good girl.
And here at the quarry is Havoc Showing. Havoc is great, but Havoc reaps. I lived in 2015 to 2016 with Dreyfus and Keller Violet in Colchester for a year. They're pretty old now, but they still will chase the ball forever. And Keller was bred, as some are, to be a blue-eyed Australian Shepherd, but often the blue-eyed Australian Shepherds are born deaf. And he was going to be put down until my friend Randy Violet, cousin of our musical director Mark Violet, adopted him. And he's great. I just wish he could have a cochlear hearing implant for just a day so he can know how loud his bark is. Willoughby and Wesley Wilberts. Willow was just a puppy in the middle with Wesley when they were about the same size, and now she's outgrown him by quite a bit. Now he can walk right under her. Bella Vanuker, Jax McIntyre, and Griffles Foster, who all spent time with us here at the court. Not on stage, but in rehearsal, some of them. Dallas Meshia, whose sister Cassandra Sebra performs here. Dallas was here last year when we were doing the Cohan review, looking like this, but now she's all grown up and we want her to come back. Maybe for our October show. We hope you'll be here for our October show. Maggie May, whose human Linda brings her to shows here, along with Linda's friends at the every Monday and Thursday thrift shop at the Methodist Church in Burlington. She sits here very quietly. And Eleanor Farrell, who works in Lyric Theater's costume shop, or plays there at least. Bruno Curry, Dusty Kane, and my neighbor Jake Tatro. Lacey Treya, Misty Marabella, who no longer lives in the building, but used to live in the same house that Jake lives in, and Obi Hemingway. Lacey is a box star I've known since she was a puppy in my building, and one day I stopped looking around the building, asking to borrow a mixer, make my own something, and I stopped there first, and she kissed me, and I forgot to close my mouth, and it was sort of a French kiss. And after I left there, my mustache smelled like meat. And being a vegetarian, I asked her owner the next day, her human rather, they own us, right? I asked her human, I said, was she eating just before I saw her? Yeah, she just had some steak tips. And so me, the gay vegetarian, went against my grain and became a French kissing meat eater first. There's Umi Riggs, a bug. He works at the Main Street Landing Film House. He's got a handle on his harness, but you don't really need to get a handle on him. He's cute. And Moo is a beagle in downtown Montpelier with her human Marie. I stopped and see them often, and I was leaving here one day last year. I was going through the rotary in Montpelier there, and I saw them, and I pulled over into somebody's driveway, and I got out of my Volvo, and it locked itself, and the spare key was in there, and it was running, and it was in neutral, and it was rolling, and I was able to stop it and call AAA to come and unlock my vehicle, but Moon and Marie had taken off. I didn't get to see them. But before I left town, less than an hour later, I decided to stop at Shaw's, and they were there. So I did get to see them after all, so God provides. Thank you, God. Got us. And there is Capone Merrill, who I spend many nights with in Barry when I'm working around here
Capone.
doing theater. Another great beagle. Josie Cummings lived in Burlington. I haven't seen her out for many, many months, so I feel like she's probably not with us anymore. She was pretty old. And Rufus, the bulldog up there, he was in my office for about 2 hours while his human had an MRI years ago. He was friendly enough, let me pet him and everything, wasn't mean, but would not take a treat from any of us until the human came out. He knew the human was okay, and then he took a treat from each one of us. Surely I met at the Liberty Street yard sales the day before the flood, and I love to meet dogs that have names like that. I was like, where's Laverne? And there's Sophia, and Holly Lasher was in rehearsal with me for playing about dogs, but she didn't play the dog, a human man played the dog. And Spanky on See Downtown Montpelier over the years would also lick my nose up. And for those of you who knew Warren Fitzmiller and his wife Jean, I think that was his name. Fitzmiller, thank you. I met this at a Lost Nation party at their house. This was Milo, who was very young, and unfortunately Warren and his wife both passed recently. Sona is from Middlesex. Well, I met her in Middlesex. And
Can you sit,
there's
Sona?
Rhea Fromkin, the rare dog that licked her own nose instead of mine. Charlie Gill Ambrose lives near the Off Center for Dramatic Arts in the north end of the Ethan Allen Shopping Plaza in Burlington, and he goes around with his human every day to all the stores in that plaza and gets a treat and he plays. Beezus is a Bernese, who I don't see anymore in Colchester, so maybe this people haven't run into each other, or maybe he's gone. Fred is all grown up by now, I imagine.
Give me that stick.
Ginger, Frida, Macy, Thea Lewis and her dog, Oakley, and Pepper, the one in the middle, little tiny toy poo, would be 16 now, she's still around. I saw her when I worked at the hospital. Haven't worked there in a couple of years now, but she always rubbed against my leg and was so sweet. Dominic came to see a show, or rather his family did here. Dominic spent the show in the box office with Michael Supermel. Huckleberry, here's a little video. Huckleberry only shows me his love with his tail here. When I used to go cuddle with him, he moved out of state. I won't see him again, probably. And Dexter. Mona Beans, my former neighbor. Amber and Willow McBetty in Guildhall, Vermont.
That's fun.
And high-strung Weimaraner Sawyer McBetty. Not as intense as his picture looks, though. And this is Star Master McNutty Bar Loungeberry. I'm amazed I have a nose at all. And one in St. Albans I didn't get the name of, and one in Stowe I forget the name of. Dogs meeting in a park. My friend Kim Most and her current dogs, but years ago I took care of her Husky Tucker and her German Shepherd Cooper when she was away, very close to them. And Dutch and Derby met outside Skinny Pancake a few weeks ago, rescued the Jack Russell littermates who were separated before being reunited. This is Dutch and Derby. Hi, Dutch. Pretty calm for Jack Russell's, actually. Hi, Derby. Sheepdog Sterling, named for a character on the animated series Archer. I met him just days ago at a New Hampshire yard sale next to several dogs I pet, but never got their names. And first I'll say, there's a couple dogs that I didn't get their names, the German and the Cocker Spaniel. On the right, that's a dog I met in Queens, New York. I went there to visit old cemeteries, but I was spending one day going to thrift stores, and I was in Astoria, Queens on Broadway, and the thrift store was opening, and the woman usually got help from this young Latino man to help set up the store and pull things out onto the sidewalk. And he was very drunk on Sunday morning, and she did not want him helping. She was older than I. And he was still, and he was grabbing a folding table and almost hit a woman coming down the sidewalk with 2 canes in the head with it. So I ended up restraining him for about 45 minutes until the police came to deal with him, take him to a drunk tank, not arrest him. I was worried I would get arrested because I didn't want to restrain him, right? And I knocked on his hat a couple times to distract him. And he tried to rip open my shirt, which happened to be a Western shirt, snapped, so it didn't crack my shirt. But I was very frazzled from that experience. And when I stopped at this park on the way back to where I was going, I saw this little dog on one end of a pretty long bench. And I thought, maybe if I sit on the other end of that bench, that dog dog would come visit me. Came right up and sat on my lap. I had a nice conversation with this human. And then the videos, up at the top is Leo, my neighbor, and then there's Papu, I met at the Main Street Landing Film House.
There we go.
Is this Papu, who is 4 months old?
No, Papu's 9 months
Oh,
old.
9 months old, Papu. Well, you're not going to be as crazy as you were before.
More flea market and yard sale dogs. I always love to have a friendly dog at a yard sale, but nobody will ever sell me their friendly dog. They say everything's priced to go. I'm like, what about the dog? No, not that. Everything? This is a dog in the parking lot of City Hall in Montpelier, unattended.
Yes, you're a good boy. Yeah. Look at that tail wagging. Yeah.
But of the hundreds of golden retrievers I've met, only about 2 of them were angry and not nice. So I take my chances.
This is Maddie. Hi, Maddie.
And I'm tall, so I don't mind if animals jump on me, even if they're only mistake. Don't jump, don't jump. That's fun. There's some more yard sale dogs. Moo! I don't know about you, but I'm dog tired. My dogs are tired too. I don't know if I can stand here much longer. I considered using a stool here, sitting on a stool, and we have lots of stool samples around the theater. There's one here, it's nice and big and brown. But it was too short, and some were too tall. I was looking for one that was just right. And even though this has a little padding, and this has a lot of padding, it still wasn't enough. And I was looking for a stool softener, but I just couldn't find one. So I decided to stay standing. But we can't finish without scratching the fever caused by cats. And I was going to wear this over my fancy dog shirt, but it's too hot. It's a hoodie I got at the yard sale for $1 where I met that sheepdog, and it's a cat vomiting rainbows. So, all the other animal pictures from decades ago were from Dad's family. But here's proof that animal love also comes to me maternally. Here's a pic of the most beautiful little girl I've ever seen. My mom, little Jeannie Svensson, lovingly holding her kitten, once she had determined it was not indeed a raccoon. Unfortunately, when I was a child, the cats I knew and tried to like just didn't like me, or didn't like kids, or maybe just didn't like people. My step-grandmother Mimi had some old cats. I tried to pet it, one of them, gently. I was a gentle boy and liked to think I grew to be a gentle man, other than that short period during the 80s when I was mean to animals. And she sliced me above my eyelid just before we went to Florida. I had a butterfly bandage on. I couldn't go in the ocean except to wade. Ah, cat. My parents' Siamese cat used my legs as a scratching post. And as a boy, just being near any cat made my eyes puff up. In the spring of 1982, my bro got a kitten, Puddles. She was feral and peed all over our Delaware home, ruining all of the laid carpet. Or maybe my brother did that and he blamed it on that. While he was away at summer camp, my parents brought Puddles to live on a farm, or perhaps he bought the farm. It's still in this. It was only in the spring of 1999 when a Burlington friend I had a crush on asked me to take his 2 sibling cats, Jan and Mal, while he waited to find a New York City apartment where he could have them. The cats were both male, named by the women who originally adopted them, believing them to be female, for Janis Joplin and Mallory, Juliette Lewis's character in Natural Born Killers. That's my pal Mal, my friend Sam is holding, and Jan the man in my arms. I believe that's the night party in my apartment when Mal died of maybe an aneurysm just 5 weeks later after I took them in. And my friend neighbor came back for Jan, who became my best friend for the next 14 years. When on June 25, 2013, I had to have him put down at the age of 16 or 17. And I didn't like cats before Jan, really. You know, I had these bad experiences and allergies. And I guess I still do have mild allergies, but I'm willing to put up with them. But it's because of Jan that I started to visit other cats when I walked as a pedestrian and be friends with other cats. So I wrote 3 songs about Jan while he was still alive. And here's a verse from one. He's got some jowls near his bowels. They wiggle when he howls. They jiggle when he prowls round town. But when the day is beating, he's always there to greet me, to turn my every frown right upside down. Years we've known each other, 9, that cat of mine is fine. And I pick him up when I got home, or cradle him upside down and say, how you doing, Jan? How you doing? Which became, how you doing, Jan? How you doing? How's my little man? How you doing? For your favorite fan, I'm strewing How you doing, Jan? How you doing? And I used to hold him like that and often say, I love you. And just once he said, meow, 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 meow. 4 distinct syllables. And I looked at him and said, what did you do? And he winked at me. Really did. But this song was accompanied by Patricia Julian, who's a flutist and teaches music at UVM, with a montage, Oh Jane. Oh, Jan, my boy, I am your man, and you are my joy. You're such a cool cat, an eternal good mood. You never get fat, though you eat plenty of food. Your hair is gray, and though you're very old, you still like to play in the sun or the cold. Oh, Jan, my friend. Oh, man, you'll be my friend to the end. You walk on my head to make me wake up. You circle my head till I fill up your cup. When I go away, you might have a snack. Then you sleep through the day till the time I come back. Oh, Jan, my son, we've done all we can to make our lives fun. When I finally relax from a long day of crap, and I sit in my slacks, you have to climb on my lap. Each time that you roam always ends just the same. You finally come home when I call out your name. Oh, Jan, my guy. Old man, never tell me goodbye. Oh, Jan, my boy, I was your man, and you were my joy. I have a little hymn to his last can of Fancy Feast, which is now 10 years old, so I'm not giving it to anybody else. And this little butterfly box with some of his whiskers and claws that had fallen out. And whiskers, I actually cut some before I had him put down, so I can reconstitute his DNA, clone him someday. But he wouldn't have the same soul, so I won't do that. But what's interesting is there's a whisker of his sticking out of this box right now, which is not stuck out. It just made its way out. So it's him speaking. Howdy, Jan. I walked past the aisle in Hannaford where the pet food and supplies were on one side and the baby food and supplies on the other, thinking, I don't know when I'll have a pet again. And I'm 43 and gay, so I'll never have a child at this point. I teared up, so I learned to pass that aisle without looking down. I got very busy over the next 7 years and didn't even think of getting another pet. But when COVID hit and the 6 more shows I was supposed to do that year, 4 of them here, weren't going to happen, I knew as a bachelor living alone that I was going to need company. The Chittenden County Humane Society has so many applications for cats that they closed the process for some time. So I ended up going to the Central Vermont Humane Society on March 24, 2020, where during early pandemic times, you couldn't just go visit all the cats. You could only pick 2 to visit. I told the young man on the phone, my prior cat, Janice, was friendly to everyone, in their laps, digging his claws into their knees while they pet him. You should meet Lux then. Once I coaxed him out of the box he was in, and he rubbed against my hand, I decided to just pick him up, flip him over, and cradle him. He didn't try to get away, but started purring immediately and touching my face with his paws, but with his claws retracted. He still does that every time, and he does it to people he doesn't matter. I knew then that he was coming home with me. Unfortunately, on the right there, he never learned to wear a COVID mask appropriately. Lux had herpes of the eyes right after coming home with me. The vet also said upon first inspection that he had a slight heart murmur, probably congenital, because he was about 2 years old when I got him. They said the Humane Society probably didn't hear it in their quick exam, as the vet's office had to go to extreme measures to get him to stop purring long enough to listen to his heart. A year later, they diagnosed him with stomatitis, a gum disease. I followed their recommendation to remove 9 of his teeth. The next year, they suggested I have all the rest removed, but I declined. He still eats his food dry and wet and treats birds like crazy, even when you're not touching him. And he seems to be doing just fine. And he talks a lot more than right here. I've come to believe that Lux is my prior boy Jan, who has been reincarnated to spend more lives with me. Of all the animals I've talked about today, he's the most important 4-footed beast in my life now. I imagine by the time I have to say goodbye to him, I'll have written at least 3 songs about him. And if he's not my cat Jan, then he is my dogs Penny, Major, and Molly, because he came back to me in black and white. But there have been and will be other great cats in my life. The orange cats here are not those I actually knew as neighbors, but they resemble them. First, Iris. After her human dog told me she'd been attacked by a rabid raccoon in the yard and died, I wrote a song and recorded it on a cassette tape and left it for them. They never discussed it after that. I honestly think I loved their cat even more than they did. And I had a psychic bond with that cat, I swear, because if I left my apartment on North Avenue, and as I walked out, I thought, Iris, I'm coming, I want to see you. I imagined she was at the back door of her house, because her owner let her out the back, thinking she would not go on North Avenue. But as I got to her house, she was coming out from the backyard with a little squeaky bark. And if I didn't think that before I left, she wasn't there. And this is just a verse of what I wrote about her. I just found out today the dear friend passed away, and I never shall see her again. That sweet orange feline was quite simply divine. It was heaven to be her good friend. She's the iris of my eye. Oh, why did you take her, God, why? I'll never forget her, so glad that I met her. I just wish she did not have to die. Red Man lived further down North Avenue from Iris. He was 16 pounds, but got thin in his old age. Red Man, oh, Red Man, I just found out that you are dead, man. The news is messing with my head, man. Red Man, oh, Red Man. Doris McQuide, that is her, was my friend's tortoiseshell, and she was always a darling with me. Late 7-days photographer Matt Thorson and his wife Diane Sullivan had several cats when I used to visit their apartment. They left the door open, and there would be a half a dozen cats lying around the apartment, and a squirrel would come in to get some nuts they'd put out. And one of the cats would just go. They got along beautifully. But the one who was always on my lap was Chippy. When I stopped by and heard that Chippy had been sick and died, I asked Matt if he had a picture I could have. I wasn't quite expecting this one he'd taken after some pre-death surgery. I met cat Heidi D'Angelo in a blanket in Connecticut during college when she was 18 and very farty. Lucky. But I believe she lived to be 21. Stephen King Williams was a dear old man who I lived with for a bit and visited with for the few years after. Ziggy Hines' passing was, of course, a huge loss to my friend Sonia Hines and to me. Dum Dum is a yellow cat, we didn't name him that we saw on our walks. Harry and Felix Niquette, 2 loving black brothers, and Adia Willis, the other black cat there. If you took a little kettle and showed it to Adia, threw it down the hall into the kitchen from the living room in a not very clean apartment, she would go into the kitchen and bring back that same kettle. And Princess, who we taught at college to roll the dice for AC/DC backgammon, by putting the dice on her head and just hold still, and telling her, okay, roll, tilt it down. And she rolled AC/DC more often than we did. I've got lots of other wonderful cats who I've loved and lost in my life. I just don't have pictures of them and didn't write songs about them. They were my Ames grandparents' cats, Mrs. Beasley, her son Junior, and Frankie and Johnny. My parents' cat, Philly, who started out with my brother's family, never liked me, despite my efforts. And when an animal doesn't like me, I cry. But she at least brought some love in my folks' lives. The Colonel and Penelope were adopted by my friends Jess and Kevin. Fred and Ginger were the first Niquette cats I knew. Mrs. Miller Boucher resided with my Aunt Linda and Uncle Ed. Gosh, there were so very many, including Maine Coon Josie Williams, who died earlier this year. Her brother is Stephen King Williams. And she has been replaced, now we're on to the living cats, by collie girl below her, who I just met on Wednesday. It was a very sweet thing. Next to her is Elizabeth Wilcox's cat, Murphy. Elizabeth works here at QuarryWorks, those of you who know her. And she says, Murphy's very shy, but when Rick comes over, Murphy comes over to say hello. There's Loki Hines, who lost his brother Ziggy just over a year ago. And Ziggy's replacement, Mochi Hines. When I first met them together, or I knew Loki already, I saw them, they were not liking each other. Mochi was new to the house. But I fed them both in Colchester the other night, and now they're friends. Leo Smith, you thought I said when Redman was 16 pounds, that was a lot, but Leo Smith is in his low 20s. And the vet told him, he's very healthy on the inside. Margot Kane and her little sister below her, Lily, who is now all grown up, but I haven't met her as grown up yet, and Mr. Cat, who is 16 and has inhabited the Last Stop Sports Bar in Winooski through 3 owners of the establishment. So who's the real owner of that establishment? Smudge Wilberts and Stevie Wilberts. Stevie is named for a character on Schitt's Creek. And here's another Stevie, Stevie Ellis, also named for a different character, I believe, who's my building neighbor. She was very shy around me until the one night I was asked to go in and feed her. Sebastian is a snowshoe Siamese who was here with me at a voiceover appointment several days ago. And Sneaky Pete McQuide.
This is Sneaky Pete, everybody. You know, we just became friends. And this is why I call myself St. Francis the Assist.
More initial encounters. Luna Panich, sister of the dog who liked to fetch her own leash. Tiki, I met at a Halloween party where he sat on my lap for a long time. And 2 of my friend Emer Feeney's elder cats. Duchess Stookley, who you can see in the picture, has to be plugged in to recharge. We play a great game. Even now she's old. I said, she rolls over and plays head belly, where I smack her belly, not smack it, touch it with one hand. She tries to grab it and touch her head with the other. Now we've got her swisher, her tail involved, all sorts of wide parts. Let's see. Oh, Kitty, and then Casey the cat's in the middle. And then there's Gizmo Crispinard, who lives with his shy but equally loving siblings, Gadget and Poets. And I thought he was a fur bug until I met my Lux. Kitty Corner on Main Street in Barrie will reopen soon after flood repairs. They've adopted out over 500 cats from a cafe-adjacent cat visiting space where you can visit with all their cats for a half hour for just $5. I knew going in I wasn't going to get another, but this one, who looked so much like a little Lux, was certainly a temptation.
What's that? You talking? We're talking.
Then he came over and got on my leg, and didn't want to get off.
I wish they could say we didn't know.
They were all safe during that flood.
Like that night.
They've got high things to climb on there, so I imagine they were. Here's Beans Fiddler, Overshot Hardware Store cats, and Allie Rinzoni. You know, is that the Overshot in Barrie or Montpelier?
Very.
One of them, they have 2. I think they have 2 cats in that store, if I'm not mistaken. This one hangs around and visits people. The other one is in like a bin or something. If you go to buy a certain thing, the cat's lying there. This, my photographer neighbor, Sarah Zariba, would refer to the 2 skittish outdoor cats as urchins, but the orange fellow I got close enough to, so I imagine he let me pet him too. Here's a friendly City Hall tortoiseshell in Montpelier in the parking lot. A Shelburne Road sweetie and a yard sale cat who would have let me pet him, and not a truck tire burst loudly nearby at the yard sale on Liberty Street. I finally got to barely touch shy Sophia the cat, whom I've known for years. There she goes. Here's a feral cat who rejected my advances, and a couple of other fine females. He told me what he thought. Well, I put in a clause that I take a brief pause before wrapping up my long tape. Okay, that was long enough. Though I've lavished affection on and urged the protection of so many different beasts, the most important animals in my life at this very moment are you, my final audience here, all of your Homo sapiens, and of all the Homo sapiens in my life who are so wonderful, my favorites have to be my parents, Dennis and Jean. Anytime they hear from matinee, we have to get a picture in front of the quarry. Isn't that like a backdrop at a photographer's studio? I want that. And without them, I wouldn't be standing here erect as a Homo sapien myself. And my brother Tim and his family, my sister-in-law Lee, my sister-in-law, my nephew Casey, who's now 17, my nephew Charlie, who's 13, they help me deal with those wonderful parents and care for them in their geriatric days. I look forward with great anticipation to all the animals I'll encounter in the next and final decades of my life. And as a reminder to myself and to everyone, most of them were here before us, and they'll be here when we're gone. Some domestics do adore us, but without us, they'll go on. Strive to drive to keep them alive, always treat them with respect, work to make their kinds all thrive, never beat them or neglect. Whether you eat them or not, if you love them or you hate them, take some time to give them thought, and for sure, appreciate them. Yes, be thankful for all creatures' lovely features, their mirth, their worth, for together they're our teachers, showing how to treat the earth. Go in peace, please, to all species. Thank you for being here. Thanks to Aaron for all things technical, for being my brother in theater. Have a safe trip home. Well, speak to me before you leave, of course. I'm not going to retreat tonight, trust me. Like a diva.